You know, you're not the only one cursed with knowledge. You ever know that guy? The guy who knows everything, but somehow still is the dumbest person in the room? You ask an ordinary question, and the smartest person in the room can give you the dumbest answer. And what makes the difference there is typically they're answering from their perspective. And 9 times out of 10, they're just so jaded in their smart people perspective that they miss the completely obvious things that are normal to everybody else. You know? Intelligence cannot protect you from a flawed perspective. In fact, an intelligent person operating inside the wrong framework can create a completely sophisticated justification for a terrible decision. You don't always need a smarter answer. Sometimes you need to ask a different question. Alchemy is really the art of creating value with psychological means instead of material means. And in order to create these values, we have to face the real possibility that we will be wrong about many things. And this leads to what I believe is the root of all alchemy, what I call intellectual courage. Intellectual courage is the willingness to be wrong in the pursuit of truth and all things that are better. It doesn't mean gambling the entire company on a few random ideas. It means creating the environments in which being wrong is survivable. And for that to happen, people need psychological safety. It doesn't mean that every idea is correct. It means that someone can discover that an idea is wrong without being punished for proposing its error. Technology has made that experimentation easier than ever. And now a small business can test a landing page, an advertisement, or an offer without risking the entire company. And yet, many organizations demand that an unconventional idea be proven before anyone is allowed to test it. They demand certainty before the evidence can exist. Now, I had to say that on my little tirade because I think intellectual courage and psychological safety are essential to understanding this whole shifting episode that we're getting into. With that being said, in this episode, we're covering 3 more sections from Rory Sutherland's book, Alchemy. The 3 are: the right thing for the wrong reason; 2, how you ask the question affects the answer; and 3, a change in perspective is worth 80 IQ points. The first section, which is doing the right thing for the wrong reason, reminds me about Daniel Kahneman's distinction between system 1 and 2 thinking. Now, if you've been following these series or even several phases, you'll know that we talk about Kahneman quite frequently. Essentially, what that means is that system 1 operates quickly and instinctively. System 2 is slower and more analytical. However, we oftentimes think that system 2 is more careful in reviewing the evidence and makes the final decision. But oftentimes, the way we decide is that system 1 has already made the decision and system 2 is just explaining the answer. The decision happens first. The justification happens afterwards. And it's worth saying that instinctive decisions are not automatically bad. Some of the decisions we make are actually very good decisions, even if we don't fully understand why we made them. For example, human beings avoided poop for a long time. Well, they actually avoided poo long before we understood bacteria. Somebody checked this. I think we started understanding germs in a real way around 1870. But we've been avoiding poo for millennia. In the same way, communities have been burying bodies away from towns without understanding the impact of burying bodies and contaminating like water supplies and plants. Their explanations may have been scientifically wrong, but the resulting behavior protected people from disease. They did the right thing for the wrong reason. And you do not need it to a rational motivation to produce rational behavior. The converse is true as well. Having impressive explanations does not guarantee intelligent behavior. So not having a rational motivation doesn't necessarily disprove rational behavior, and having an impressive explanation does not dismiss the possibility of intelligent behavior. Sutherland describes a program that installed free smoke detectors in at-risk homes. So this company would come in, put the smoke detector on the room. Residents would accept one detector, but frequently they didn't want a second or third smoke detector to be installed in their house. And Sutherland compared this to the restaurant skill where they ask for your water. Now, if you're in America, this probably isn't going to make a lot of sense because by and large, we always drink tap water. But in different parts of the world, they bring out two different bottles, and that is whether you want still water or sparkling water. And what he is saying is by presenting the question as still or sparkling, it doesn't give the buyer the opportunity to think, yeah, I want tap water. So what he suggests is that the installers change their approach in the way that they ask the question by saying, hey, did you want 3 smoke detectors or 4? And by doing so, they shortcut the thought process that says, I only want 1. By changing the question, you then change the behavior on the other side. So, every question contains an assumption. And every assumption that we ask places a border around the answers that we see. And understand this, right? And again, I'm never going to condone manipulation, but framing can be manipulative. And framing is unavoidable. There's an ethical question that arises whether or not it helps someone make a beneficial decision or hides information to exploit them. And that's something that you have to think about as you develop your marketing as well. Because the questions you ask to bring people in are going to determine whether or not they join or how long they join for. A computer pioneer, his name was Alan Clay, said that a change in perspective is worth 80 IQ points. And that's not a literal measurement, but let's put it this way. If your IQ is below 80, society has a very hard time with you. And if your IQ is above 160, that society also has a hard time with you for the opposite reason. 1, because you're not smart enough, and then 2, you're too smart. Not to be weird about it, but that's what that means. And again, it's not a literal measurement. It's the point of correct perspective can produce an intelligence at a level that is hard to articulate. It is so powerful, this concept of reframing. And Sutherland illustrates this with a dog standing behind a small fence. The dog could potentially cross it, but he has a shock collar that's buried underneath the ground, right? That visible shock collar creates a barrier that the dog will not cross. The visible fence is not restraining the dog. The invisible boundary is. Conventional business logic is that invisible fence. Organizations reach the edge of their framework because that is as far as their electric fence will let them go. And then they freeze. But there's still more to be gained, and that is the impact of alchemy. Now, why aren't more people joining? Let's talk about some of the things that apply to you as the CrossFit gym owner. You could ask a couple questions, right? Why aren't people joining? And what makes someone afraid? Or you could ask the question, what makes someone afraid to join? And those are going to be approached differently. Why aren't people joining? What makes someone afraid to join? One gives you a whole myriad of questions. The other one helps you lower the barriers to bring people in. Those are 2 different things. Here's another one. How can we make CrossFit easier? Versus how can we encourage more people to be a better athlete? All right, so both of them are the question of how intense the workouts are. The one says, hey, how do we lower the bar? The other one says, how do we get people to raise the bar? You may not need to remove the difficulty. The difficulty could be what makes the experience valuable. You may need to change the context surrounding it. And that is what all of this reframing is about. And that's exactly what Sutherland is calling us to do. And the only way we can get to that point is if we embrace the intellectual courage to be able to move into those spaces, right? Once you're intellectually courageous, you can shift the frame, gain insight that will take you further. Which, by the way, is the reason that we're Enoch books. Because Enoch was in a story where he had special insight. And that comes from intellectual courage. Not always physical courage, but intellectual courage. Logic is an extraordinary tool for evaluating an idea, but it's not always the best tool for discovering one. Discovery requires courage, and it requires the courage to be wrong. And once you get past that courage, the world opens up in ways that you cannot imagine. Now, if you own a CrossFit gym and you want to do some reframing and see the problems that you're facing with your growth or your people or your workouts, give us a call. Contact us at Enoch Marketing, and we will help you to examine your questions and uncover the opportunities that are hidden by your current assumptions. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and follow along as we continue through Rory Sutherland's book, Alchemy. My name is Colin Charles. This is Enoch Marketing, and we will see you in the next episode.